Welcome to the ALTIS Podcast. I'm your host, Stu McMillan. In this series of podcasts, I'm sitting down with some of the speakers at the very first ALTIS conference. We're calling it the Speed Summit. It's in Chicago in early June. If you haven't grabbed your ticket yet, the ALTIS Speed Summit, presented by 3x4 Genetics, is set to be the most impactful speed event ever held. Over 3 days, June 6th, 7th, and 8th, we're bringing together top coaches, scientists, and performance leaders for deep hands-on learning, challenging the way we think, train, and coach. Huge thanks to our sponsors, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, and Team Builder for making this event possible. Early bird pricing is available until I think the end of this month, so 2 more weeks until March 31st. If you check out altis.world, you'll find more details there. Anyways, on to today's podcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend, Loren Landow. He's one of the most respected coaches in the sport performance industry. He's worked across private settings, owning and operating his own facility in Denver, in the NFL with the Denver Broncos, and now in the NCAA as the Director of Football Performance with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. And all the while shaping how athletes prepare, perform, and stay healthy at some super high levels. We dug into why he made the jump from private coaching to team settings, how his philosophy has kind of evolved over time and how it hasn't, and what young coaches often miss about this profession. I started off by asking Loren, what do you do and why do you do it?
What do? I serve. I've learned over the course of my career, like I used to always want to be known as this or known as that. And then when I boiled it down to it, really what I do is to serve, and it's to serve the athletes that I work for, and it's to serve my staff, it's to serve my head coach, but it's ultimately to serve the athletes and, to give them, me, authenticity each and every day, real conversations, good or bad. It's not just about performance anymore of your sprint technique or your, lifting the bar speed. It's really about connecting with this person and truly understanding that I'm here to develop you in multiple ways. I think that's, I think I even forgot what the question now was, but what do? I serve. And what was the second part to it?
And why do you do that?
Why do I do that? It's funny. I think I was always looking for something that fulfilled me. And when I made things about me and my attainment of different things, it never fulfilled me. Serving fulfills me. And that's what fills my cup, lack of a better term. But I've found, we always say when we love what we do, you never work a day in your life. But I challenge you to sit there and say, I serve in what I do, and you'll definitely never work a day in your life, and you'll never get fatigued or tired. When you understand that you're here to serve, that's been the biggest change in my mindset, I'd say in the last 10 years, maybe a little less than that.
So then when you if it's less than that, and we're getting up there in age now, why were you doing the things that you were doing prior to that? Like, what was your motivation prior to now? Kind of, you're serving. That's just why you do this now. Like, let's go back a little bit further than that. I don't know much about like what is your background as far as, were you an athlete? Were you a football player? Like, how did you even end up in this industry?
I was a three-sport athlete. I was marginal at best, thought I was better than I was. When I look back at who I was, I actually always had really good strength and power output. I had really good speed and short area space. I had decent short area quickness, but I just didn't know how to put it all together. I didn't know what the training really looked like. I probably trained more like a bodybuilder than anything back in the day, when I was playing sports, because there wasn't a lot out there on sports science. And, if I was smarter back when I was an athlete, I would have paid a lot more attention to how the track and field guys were probably training as well. But you just didn't know. It was maybe looking at different magazines and, oh, this is a good exercise split. And you really didn't know what you didn't know. And you listened to the older guys in the high school weight room. And that's kind of how you kind of took your path on what you were going to do. And then as you went through your career path, you hitched your wagon to different mentors along the way. So for me, I think I did always want to be a coach that I felt I never had. And that was kind of maybe my first thought process into serving, but I didn't get it at the time.
Mm.
And then, to kind of fast forward a bit, you asked me like, we've been in this for 30 years now. And in the last 8 to 10 years, I really realized it was about service.
Mm.
But I think even before that, like, for some reason, when we're younger, we want to be heard and we want to show that we know our stuff, the typical Dunning-Kruger effect type of path. And I think that's what was like a driver for me is I wanted to be taken serious and I wanted to be, somebody in the industry that was trailblazing, for lack of a better word. And, I felt myself frustrated along the way when those things weren't happening, or I didn't feel that those things were happening at the rate of speed at which I hoped. Once I started not making it about me anymore, ironically enough, things started to happen better.
Do you feel like that's a necessary part of your journey though? Like where it has to be about you, where it's you kind of have to be a little bit selfish if you're trying to be really good at this, trying to learn
No,
as much as you can to serve you first.
no doubt. I've always said, like, I always tell my elite athletes, like, you have to be selfish to be great.
Mhm.
And so I do think that there's moments and times where, and I'm still selfish in many regards, right? Like, we put so much into our career that I am being selfish away from my family at different times. So I still think there's some selfish tendencies to serve and to be great at things. But you do have to be selfish in the process to help others. It takes away from somewhere else. So I think that's one thing to be aware of. But I always tell my elite athletes, I said, I love the fact that you need to be selfish in your sport, but now you think you're going to cross over and become a coach. It's really hard. And they say, well, why is it so hard? I said, because to be an athlete, you have to be selfish. To be a coach, you have to be selfless in many aspects. And I've always found that that's the hardest transition for these athletes, elite athletes who then come into the coaching side. And they learn pretty quickly if it's for them or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Um, so let's kind of go back to where you started again. I asked Griff the same question. Did you kind of just fall into coaching, or is this something that you knew that you wanted to do while you were still kind of competing yourself?
Yeah, I think I fell into it, but I don't think many people know this. I think I shared it on one other podcast, but when I came out of my undergrad degree, I went into cardiac and pulmonary rehab.
Hmm.
And so for the first 6 months of my career, that's really where I lived. I was doing metabolic testing and helping people after, serious cardiac infarctions and, pulmonary diseases. And so for me, that was where my career path started. I will say that I learned early and often that that was a wearing job. I only did it for so long, but it was wearing because many of those people who were in those scenarios, they didn't want to change their lifestyle habits. They didn't have those higher bars or those bigger goals of like, I want to get better. Some of them were like, I'm still going to smoke. I'm still going to drink. I'm still going to eat poorly, and I'm still not going to exercise. So I think for me, that was really hard to sit there and say, that's my day to day. So that's what led me into coaching and, finding a younger, hungrier type of clientele that wanted to actually, you know, shoot for higher aspirations in their health and their fitness and their performance.
What type of athlete did you start working with early days there?
I would say it was I was really scared to get involved with the elite athlete too soon. I had to learn this craft. I had to really learn these methods of this craft. And so I started with a lot of the younger athletes and middle school, high school aged athletes. And unfortunately, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And you realize, somewhere down the path that oh, there were some really good things I did, and some things I look back on historically. I'm like, what was I thinking? And so I think you just go through that path. But I always wanted to cut my teeth on the younger athlete and just try to learn. And that's where it started for. And I kind of worked my way into more of the college athlete, and then I got into NFL combine prep back in 1998. And did that for almost 20 years. But along the way, I worked with athletes of all sports, but it did mainly start with American football.
Would you recommend that type of journey to most coaches? Like start with kids and be have throw a wide net and work with as many different athletes? I know what your answer is going to be here, but
Yeah.
that would have what your path is basically similar to mine. I started coaching in the early 90s. In 1995, I started my own business, and I was working with kids primarily. And we had about 120 soccer teams from the ages of 12 to 17 that we would see every week. So I spent 40 hours of my week working with teenagers. And
Mhm.
man, if you can keep the attention of 120 teams of teenagers every week, that's you cut your teeth pretty sharply on that type of coaching.
Yeah, I say you age in dog years
And
when you're working with that age of
yeah.
athlete.
But it was, I look back at it and said that is some really rich coaching landscape that still serves me today.
No doubt. And I would say, over my course of time, just learning to deal with different, developmental levels. We can talk about biological, chronological age differences and, being able to sit there and have different connections, conversations, and just learn from the people in front of you. And I always looked at it as learning all the way, even when I was younger in the field. Like I just want to use these opportunities as cutting my teeth. So I would suggest to any coach, like making sure that you're working with the youngest populations first and foremost, because now you really have to simplify things of what it is that you can't overtalk them. You've got to truly sit there and say, how well do I know my methods? To be able to work with this athlete because they're not going to understand when I try to go over their head, which is what all late 20, early 30 something year old coaches always tried to do. And so working with that population, it forces you really to get to the art of coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. When I don't think I've asked you this question either. It's like when did Landau Performance start as a facility? Like when did you
Hmm.
open doors?
It morphed.
And what led you to do that?
Yeah, so it morphed. I was involved into the velocity
Yeah.
system in the early 2000s and saw a model that was really good. I don't think from a business model it had been quite figured out yet. And I saw some things that were really good from the person who owned my actual franchise. And then I
Let's
saw some
let's
things
just
that were
pause, let's just pause there for a second because I don't think there'll be very many people who even remember velocity and what that is. So let's just tell us what that is first.
Sure. Velocity was a series of, chain facilities that had some really elite coaches in it. That, it kind of followed the model of athletes' performance back in the day, which is now Exos. But, Velocity was a brainchild of Loren Seagrave and an incredible, vision that he had. And at some point, I think it was upwards of 50 to 60 locations nationwide. And unfortunately, the facility that I was in, after about 4 years, it kind of ran its course, and the business model didn't succeed. And so along the ways, I was looking at that, and I was asking myself, why didn't it work? Was our overhead too high? Like, what was the issue? And so what I tried to do is sit there and build a model through an orthopedic firm called Steadman Hawkins, where we started out into an 800 square foot facility. This was after Velocity. I sat there and said, okay, I want to build this thing small and then build it bigger. So we started in 800 square feet. It was myself and one other coach. We had interns, show up, every semester, and we cherry picked the best interns and turn them into employees, and two who are still employees of mine today.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that
Wow.
was early 2000s. So the Stedman Hawkins model went from 800 square feet to 3,200 square feet to 9,800 square feet to where we're at right now at 15,000 square feet facility. So it was morphing over time, and about halfway to I bought out my partners. I was partnered with five other orthopedic doctors, and I bought them out and changed the name to Landow Performance. Now, if you were to ask me today, and I think Eric Cressy and I both say this, is I wish my name was not attached. I wish I would have named it something else. But once I bought my partners out, I knew that there would be a weird understanding of what path Loren Landow went if I didn't name the business my name. So that was one thing I wish I could do over is just name it something else that's not my name, but it is what it is.
It's too late now, buddy.
Yeah, too late.
So here's a question. So you've spent most of your career then doing that, working in the private sector, running a very successful facility. building a reputation as being one of the best coaches on the planet. And then a few years ago, you say, I'm done with that. I want to work for people again. I want to
Yeah.
work for somebody and be an employee. And first it was with the Broncos, obviously, and now with Notre Dame. Uh, why? Why
Uh,
would you do that?
Yeah, it's probably selfish, right? When you talk about serving and like why you do these things. But I would say, part of me was I felt like I had done something fairly successful in the private side that's hard to do, and that's to create a sustainable business model. Well, now the business model is sustaining without me, and I can hand off leadership to other people such as Augie and Amber and Eric, who are like my right hand people there. So, one, it was the opportunity that I saw to fulfill a dream selfishly, I guess, to sit there and say, can I do this at the next level? And can I take different systems of training? And can I influence elite athletes to train and do things a certain way? Can I be a part of something that's bigger than me? Is the thought process, right? I think in the private sector, you have everybody rowing in the boat, but everybody's kind of rowing in different directions. I I I am hungry for everybody to row in the same direction. And so for me, being attached to an organization such as the Broncos or now Notre Dame, I knew that from the top down, everybody was going to be rowing in that same direction for the common goal. And I think that was the thing that really drove me the most was being a part of this thing where everybody is a Pro Bowl type player, an all-star, and they're all going after the same thing. And it's hard, it's challenging. And I knew it was going to be hard and I knew it was going to be challenging. But to be honest with you, it's been super fulfilling in ways that I didn't even know.
Give me an example.
Well, first of all, going from owning your own business to now working for somebody, it's different, right? All decisions end and stop with me at my facility. And now here there's a series of ladders and just communication paths. I would say that the day-to-day people on the outside will never know all the contingencies on the inside, whether you're professional or college. You don't know the limitations. You don't know, the athlete that you're dealing with. You don't know the limitations of what you get. I remember when I was on the outside, I was like, man, I would do this and I would do this and I would do this. You get into the building, you get into these positions, you're like, oh, I can't do these certain things, or I don't have the time, or it doesn't line up. And so I think a lot of people on the outside always say, well, there shouldn't be this many this types of injuries or that type of injuries, and here's what they need to do. It's like people have no idea the hours upon hours of meetings and research and things that are being done in these facilities to create a best practices approach. So I think those are the things that a lot of people don't realize until they're in these roles, like how big they really are.
Yeah. What was your biggest surprise? Like you had worked with NFL players for many years prior to, going full time with the Broncos. When you went in with the Broncos, like what was the biggest thing that surprised you? Oh man, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would say I would say as a fan perspective, like, or even as an outsider, you never really get a full appreciation of the intensity and the volume of which these practices have. You might get clips on NFL Network and you might get clips on, the local news, but you really have no idea. Like you're seeing like B-roll of certain parts of practice that are basically your indie period. They're basically further warm up. And so you look at those and you create these preconceived notions of what it is. And then once you actually get in and you see the speed at which these guys repeat each and every day, blew my mind. Like it blows my mind to this day, the repeatability of these athletes at high speed and power outputs.
Do you think that's the kind of the biggest misconception then that most people external to that environment would have about NFL? Like just the yeah, as you say, we don't see that, we don't know that, and just the work that gets put in and the violence throughout that. Like, is that what or is there another like massive misconception that we don't see?
I think it's that. And I think that people really have no idea how much goes into the preparation of it on the coaching side, on the strength and conditioning side, on the front office side. Like it is an impressive machine of work that you see in these facilities. But the amount of meeting time that these guys go through, walkthroughs, like the Sunday quarterback, the fan who's sitting there saying, "Oh, they should do this, they should do that." Like the amount of preparation that goes into these moments, you have no clue. I think the other thing that blew my mind, Stu, was from an operations standpoint. all the logistics that have to line up to give you the entertainment that you see as a fan on Saturday and Sunday. Absolutely mind blowing. And it goes back to what we talked about. It takes everybody to make these things happen.
Yeah. I talked to Griff about this last week. The grades, the NFL grades just came out.
Mm.
The controversy around many of those. But I asked him, and I'll ask you the same question, even though you're not in the NFL anymore. Like, what is the difference between a S&C staff with an A grade and the S&C staff with a D grade?
It's hard to say. I don't know if the people that they're pulling on those just have beef with the S&C coach. Who knows? But I'm sure
Well, then
people have like,
let's say a good S&C staff and one that, yeah, let's say in your experience, in your estimation, with your experience, your expertise, how would you define the difference between like an excellent S&C staff and one that is still learning?
yeah, I think that you have to look at, an excellent S&C staff, as we know, should be looking at all the KPIs per the position played. They should then be looking at a good needs analysis of each individual within those KPIs that either they're lacking in or what they need to be better with. But then I think it comes back to the individualization, which I think a lot of S&Cs don't do. I think that they might have a quarterback specific plan, they might have a specialist specific plan, but like each individual having a plan that maybe isn't far off the tree of what everybody else is doing, but specific to their injury history, it's specific to their age in or their years into the league. So I think you have to have an individualized approach, and I think maybe that could be a why. It's hard to say why guys vote the way they do on those things, but I think a good strength and conditioning coach at any level has to be agile. Has to be agile, and you have to complement what's happening on the field. You can't just sit there and say, "This is my block of training. Here's what we're going to do." You have to sit there and say, "Okay, who owns the time in the adaptation?" I always say, whoever owns the time owns the adaptation. So when we go into practices, like that's our sports specific preparation, our specific preparation. And so I need to make sure as a strength and conditioning coach that I'm not pushing my own agenda of, oh, we're by all means, we're going to squat heavier by the end of this block. Well, what's the priority adaptation? And I think that's what a really good S&C coach needs to do is they need to put away their bias and they say, what is the adaptation that is the priority right now?
Love that. Who owns the time owns the adaptation. That's good.
Yeah.
Um,
And you know where I got that from, Stu? I got that from the MMA world.
really?
Yeah, I got that from the MMA world, and I started looking at that saying, gosh, like I can't get in the way of the adaptations that are trying to be created in wrestling practice and all the sparring. I need to make sure that I have more of a calculated plan, and that's when I went into undulated models for my fighters. Before I was very block driven in my models, and then I went into undulated models after the wrestling coach from our fight team said, "What are you doing to these guys? They look like crap." I'm like, got it, got it. So remembering, really what the adaptation that we're trying to drive is.
Interesting. Great. So after a few years in working in the NFL, you chose, well, yeah, I mean, I guess you didn't choose. Yeah, I guess you didn't choose, but you're no longer in the NFL. And then you took about a year when you're back at Landow, for private facility before going to Notre Dame.
Mhm.
Tell me the biggest difference between working in the NFL and working at a program like you do right now in Notre Dame.
Oh, there's a lot of similarities. You're working with some incredible athletes, and I can only speak to Notre Dame, but our leadership from top down is unmatched.
Hmm.
From our president of the university to our athletic director to our director of football operations to our head coach. I mean, you just see it. And then with the kids here, these kids are different. When I was interviewing, people kept telling me, just wait till you see these kids here. And, I was like, well, what does that mean? And when I got here, they were as advertised. These kids are type A, like these kids, they're Notre Dame kids. So if you have got to choose hard, which our head coach always says to choose hard in life, but you have to choose hard to come to Notre Dame because it's going to be tough. The academics are going to be tough. The winters are going to be tough. There's nothing that's going to be easy in this path. And these kids along the way, man, they just inspire you how they chop at the bit every day and how they work and how they ultimately inspire me, Stu. Like I got into this thing, to serve, but these kids are serving me right back because of their work and who they are as human beings. I always say, hey, I'm not concerned with the future generations if they're Notre Dame kids. These kids are special. So I guess I'm very biased to the lens I look at here. But these kids are so coachable, Stu. Like if you ask them to do anything and everything, and that's one thing I learned early on. I said, okay, I'm not going to lose an opportunity to talk to really smart kids and say, here's why we're going to do what we're going to do. I explain to our kids before every workout. I tell them what the emphasis is, what the intention needs to be, because I know with a smart athlete, I'm going to get buy-in. And if I get further buy-in by educating them, they're going to go through two brick walls for me, not just one. So to me, it was the intentionality that we laid out with these kids that's different. It is different than what I saw at the NFL. These kids are whatever you tell them they're going to do, and they're special.
So coachability, buy-in, that's different.
Yeah, the coachability. Yeah, and not to say that the athletes in the NFL weren't coachable. They definitely are, but I think that you have athletes that have a wide array of influences. Somebody who may have trained with this person, trained with that person, went to this facility, had this strength coach in college, and so I think you're trying to morph a lot of different philosophies into the NFL. Where in college, like they're coming from some pretty good high school programs, but you really can influence, and you can really, the word I use around here all the time is develop. My goal is to develop the 4 years that you're here at Notre Dame. That is the goal. And here's a great example of that, Stu. I saw one of the biggest gaps that I could fill coming in right away was going to be team speed. And I talked about it in my first meeting on January 15th. I said, I'm going to work on team speed. And I didn't tell them exactly at the time what it was going to look like. But our first 3 weeks of training in January, where most teams are just running the kids into the ground, I was just teaching patterns and concepts and positions. That's all I was doing.
Mm.
For my skills and my mids and my bigs, we did things that were KPI specific to what their tasks are. But for my skills and my mids, like we just rehearsed positions and taught them concepts. That was the biggest thing. And then after about 3 weeks, we said, go.
Mm.
And it was different. It was different. And so to me, it was an incredible opportunity to sit there and say, here's a major gap that I see in development. How can I influence that early? And so sure enough, like then we start our summer program after spring ball, and these kids picked up right where they left off with understanding the concepts of the movement that we're talking about, simple things.
I would assume that differs pretty specifically from the work in the NFL, that development piece where you have the time and frankly the development of the players themselves are not at the point where they would be if you're working in the NFL or playing in the NFL yet. That there is an actual opportunity to work on these things where in the NFL it's I talked to Griff about this. It's not really a bigger, stronger, faster thing anymore. It's just
Mhm,
keeping them healthy and keeping them playing, keeping them on the
mhm.
field. Where NCAA is, there's still an opportunity there for you to impact how they play the game.
Yeah, looking at development, looking at performance, looking at resiliency, like as this triangular approach.
Yeah.
And you do have more time now. Obviously, we played pretty late this year, January 20th. So
Yeah.
that pushed our timeline almost a little bit more like an NFL offseason to a degree. But that's the challenging thing in the NFL is you just have limited windows. So one, you're getting, the top 1% of the college players in the NFL anyway. But the hardest part for me in the NFL was like, I just don't know who you're training with away from here. Or are you training? You may be working with somebody great, but you're not showing up. So those were always the challenging things. But here, you know what the kids are doing. The kids here, you have to say, whoa, instead of go.
I like it. Um, so start of your career working with kids, moving on to Velocity, early days of Stedman Hawkins and Landau, NFL, NCAA. Throughout your 30 years-ish now,
Yeah, 30.
how's your philosophy changed? Or or how has it been similar? I guess what are the changes and the differences between now and 20 to 25 to 30 years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated with movement.
Yeah.
and that hasn't changed.
Okay.
I think that, how I go about teaching certain things or what I deem as good movement quality has changed. I think in my early to mid 20s, even early 30s, I was that coach. Like I didn't want to see a hair out of alignment when we did certain things. And then as I got older to understand the fluidity of movement, like there's a lot of different movement characteristics that need to happen for good elastic propulsion and the ability to sink and drop the hips to decel and then to re-excel. So I look at like rhythm as like one of my biggest things that I pay attention to. If I see a rhythmic cadence or tempo, I usually know that it's pretty elastic. I usually know that it's fluid and it's relaxed. And I also know that it's probably going to be pretty elastic and explosive. So if I do see an arrhythm, like I kind of work outside in, or I'm sorry, inside out. And I start to see how does the knee hinge, how's the foot strike and how do those things, and is one side blocking early on that knee, history of surgery or history of injury or something that they're dealing with that they haven't told you about that is throwing off the cadence of the rhythm.
Mm.
And so for me, rhythm still plays a massive, massive role. Deceleration, I do still believe that deceleration is specific strength. There's so many so much different than track and field, right? We have so many more decelerations in football. You have almost a decel for every excel in football. So it's a skill and it has to be something that's taught. And it's got to be not even just taught. I do think taught is an interesting word, but I think it has to be, you have to saturate the athlete with moments of deceleration that are everything from closed to open to reactive. And so for me, those are some tenets that still haven't changed in my mind and in my belief.
And what has changed? And
Um,
did you like you talk a lot about rhythm there? Like rhythm was the one thing that I took out of your answer there. Is that something that you kind of picked up from track and field and maybe early experiences with Seagrave?
yeah, so people don't really like. I was telling my staff a few months ago, like I was fortunate enough to spend time with Randy Huntington
Mm.
back in the mid to late '90s. And Randy probably doesn't even remember it. It was at a Colorado Athletic Club Inverness. Randy Huntington, I had time with Lauren Seagrave, and then obviously Coach Dan Paff has been a massive influence and mentor of mine, and then as well as you have as well. So I think rhythms kind of when you're searching for those answers that you really don't know, and there's all of a sudden somebody says a word. It might be pattern, it might be shapes, it might be rhythm. Rhythm always stuck out to me as like that makes sense. When I see rhythm, when I see something arrhythmic, I know I need to find a solution. Um, and if it looks arrhythmic but it's not picture perfect, I don't mess with it.
Hmm.
If it's rhythmic, picture perfect, and not picture perfect, I don't mess with it. Like I want to see more repetitions of the athlete before I deem something is bad or wrong. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm getting more philosophical in my age, but I'm starting to believe that there's very few wrong natural instincts of movement. I think a lot of times as coaches we tend to get in the way.
I could not agree more with that. And that's probably if somebody asked me the same question, what have you changed your mind on the most over the course of your 35 years coaching? It's that. I used to see movement and I had a picture in my brain about what perfect movement should be.
Mhm,
I did everything to try to change this movement in front of me to
mhm,
match what I thought was perfect in my brain,
mhm.
where it is now just, does it look fluid? Does it look rhythmical? Is it this athlete's most natural way of moving? And yeah, let's just feed that. Like that's so important.
Yeah, and I think as a young coach, you're looking for these models, and so many times we use coming out of a block start as our model that we're going to try to emphasize. And I was really listening to Dan talk about how every step that you accelerate from, it's changing. Well, now add sport to that.
Mm.
Now add sport of reactiveness. And so to me, it's like just don't get in the athlete's way. If you see something that is like truly like somebody overreaching or somebody who's casting way back, easy fixes, those distort rhythm. Boom, easy fix. Let's see what we can do. But I'd never tell the athlete when or how. I'll infiltrate them with drilling and then wait for it to clean up.
Love it. You're somebody that's, like I was talking to a friend the other day about our mutual friend, Buddy Morris.
Mm.
And Buddy would come when we were here, and we're back in Arizona now. But he would come by the track at least monthly. And this would have been Buddy would have been in his early 60s.
Mm.
And every time he comes, he's got his little notebook.
Yep.
He's having a conversation with you, and he's just writing down his notes. And here's a guy that's, he's a legend in this industry, right? And he's still like he is the very definition of a lifelong learner. And I would consider you the same, right? You're always looking to learn more and to be better and to find ways to continue to push yourself. Where did that come from with you? And what does your current learning process look like? And how has that differed over the course of your career? So I guess three questions there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I might have you repeat some of them as we go. But funny enough, I was just talking about Buddy the other day. He and I took Matt Jordan's force plate course together, and Buddy and I like to look at a guy like Buddy, and I always think of Jimmy Radcliffe as well. Anytime I've seen them at conferences, they're in the front row and they're taking notes. So for me, I always wanted to make sure that I'm that same guy as well. Like I'm taking notes. What can I learn from this person? How can they change the way that I'm looking at something right now? I have a rule because of this, because I do like to believe I'm hardwired, but I am open-minded. I'll never watch somebody present right before I present
Mm.
because I don't want it to change my thought process before I go present, because that's how much I'll look under every stone, and I don't want it to change my message before I go present that day. So that's a weird thing about me, but I do believe I've always been somebody that has to push the education hard. I need to see repetitions over and over and over to make something really stick for me the way I learn. I'm very visual with my learning as well. So I need to see repetitions. I need to write things down. I need problem solve. And that's been always probably the thing for me is how can I better problem solve? It frustrates me to no end when I don't feel like I have an answer for an athlete. Again, goes back to serving. Your mind is racing in the middle of the night of what can I do to help this athlete get through this injury? What can I do to this athlete or for this athlete to, help them work through this plateau? So I think that's where it really started. And then I realized like there's a lot of really smart people out there. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of ways to get this thing done in our field.
Yeah.
And if you think you got it figured out, pack your bags. It's time to shut it down.
Mhm. Yeah. So your process now then is kind of, is it
Yeah.
bottom up, sort of emergent? Here's a problem. Let me figure out how to solve this problem. Or is it a little bit broader than that?
I would say it's pretty acute. So when I came into, I'll use the Broncos as an example, and then Notre Dame. When I went to the Broncos, I had to live and breathe everything of the Broncos. I had to understand processes and how they did this, and I wanted to make sure I went to every rookie function. I wanted to see exactly what the athletes had to go through. I had to learn the landscape. And same thing when I came to Notre Dame, I had to learn so many things of the academic schedule. I had to learn so many things of how they collect data and how they distribute data and how they use the data. So for me, part of my learning has been the on the fly, right? Anytime you get into a new work environment, you're learning their processes and you're looking for things that are either really efficient or the things maybe aren't efficient that they can't see. And so for me, I was trying to uncover like just how do they do things. And so I spent my first year, I always say the first trip around the park, just trying to figure out, each and every time of year when we have a change in schedule, what that means for my room, what that means for my job duties, what that means for what's coming up ahead. So it was always learning that side of things, but I'd say my learning now is very fluid. It might be a book on biomechanics one day, and on another day it might be leadership techniques and books like that, or materials, different articles. So I'd say it's very fluid, but we're always getting such great information from our sports science director here, John Waggle. He's always pushing great information, and we're just trying to sit there and say, how can we better use this information to dovetail and work for performance and resiliency?
You sent me an Instagram message the other day. I won't say what it was or what
Mhm.
post it was that you shared, but we both had a chuckle over it. And both of us have a certain amount of experience and expertise in this industry where we can see something like that and understand that that's just a bit silly.
Mhm.
But that is a problem in the industry now because many who maybe lack the expertise or experience that we have won't understand that that is a bit silly.
Hmm.
We say a lot now, it's not, there's no such thing as an information problem in our industry. There's information up the yin yang. It's more of a deciphering problem. A young coach will they are challenged to understand the difference between these silly things and maybe something that is maybe not so silly. So what kind of advice do you have for younger coaches that in a world of literal infinite information, how do they determine what information to pay attention to and what information to just sort of stay away from or ignore?
How is that? Stephen Plisk used to always say, if it makes your BS detector go off, pay attention.
Yeah.
So number one, like pay attention to things that just, nah, that doesn't sound right. But you
Mhm.
have to be rooted with strong fundamental principles, scientifically based back principles. Understanding that, you know, research is changing and the landscape is changing, but you have to have some principles that make you not just swing to this Instagram post and, oh, I'm going to do this now, or now I'm going to do this. Like, ask yourself why. Does it fit in my program? Does it make sense? We see it all the time with different exercise selections for this one thing. And most of the posts out there are an N of one. And an N of one isn't research, and one is a good story.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important that you take it in a grain of salt. What's the longevity of the person who's posting it out there? What's their history? What's their understanding of the subject? And I always say take things all the way back to biomechanics, anatomy, physics, and really back engineer your question and answer pros and cons of something based on those principles: anatomy, physics, biomechanics,
Great. Love that.
and physiology.
Yeah. The other one for me is like get a part of it. I mean, you've actually said this earlier. Like you've had some great mentors. Like find
Mhm.
a really, really good mentor and then just attach yourself to that mentor's network. So
Yeah.
people you can trust. And then you've got something like this and say, I'm not sure about this. My BS detector is kind of going off a little bit. I'm
Mhm.
not certain. It could just be cool and new and I don't know much about it. Let me send it to Loren Landow or let me send it to Dan
Mhm.
Pfaff, or let me send it to Randy Huntington. Hey Dan, what do you think of this? Is this BS? Yeah, that's BS.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Appreciate it. And then move on.
Isn't it funny too, Stu, if you talk to coaches that you kind of grew up with in the ranks and you haven't talked to them for quite some time? I have a dear friend of mine, he's the Olympic director at University of Kansas, Luke Bradford. And Luke and I will not talk for sometimes a year or 2 years. But oddly enough, when we talk, he and I come to similar solutions or changes in mindset that we haven't even spoke about. It's really, really cool to see. So I think that's part of the evolution of your network and the evolution of just sniffing out things. Hey, I used to also be one of those guys like, it was all performance driven. Shoot, man, like work capacity is a big deal. Like you need to be prepared to handle practice. You need to be prepared to handle the rigors of the worst case scenarios. And so I think in the performance world, we're always tinkering with what's the ideal to be ready, race ready. Well, we're not working with track and field athletes. And so for me, it's funny to watch how my mindset's changed on certain things, especially repeatability and things like that. And then talk to Luke Bradford a year or 2 years down the road, and he and I are on the same wavelength. We haven't even talked about it.
That's awesome. And then, like I find that happens all the time with me as well. Like it's just like I haven't talked to people like you said, like for a year or two, or even sometimes 3, 4 years. And you just link up and you're just working and reading, even reading the same stuff.
Mhm.
It's interesting that you have the same thought there. Final question. You're probably on the backside of your coaching career. You've probably been coaching for longer than you've got coaching left in front of you.
No doubt.
What is the next few years look for Lauren? Like, are you one of those guys that is just going to be coaching until, you just got to peel yourself off the sidewalk or the field or the weight room somewhere, or someone who's, all right, I've got another 5 years of good coaching in me, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to retire to my house in Grand Cayman.
I love it. I love it. Hey, sign me up. I'd say, realistically, I can see myself coaching 10 more years.
Yep.
When I got the job here at Notre Dame, I told them I wanted this to be the last chapter of my career. Whether
Mhm.
that happens or not, that's in the future. But I know I'll always be doing the coaching from the side. I'll always be mentoring, and I'll always be kind of on that quest of learning, even when my coaching days are over.
Love it. Loren, I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, Stu.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Loren is truly one of the legends in this industry, and I value every opportunity I get to spend time with him. He's not only a great coach and leader, but an amazing human, as everyone who's come in contact with him can attest. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. Big thanks again to our sponsors, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, and Team Builder for making all of this possible. And if you haven't yet, please check out the ALTIS Speed Summit, Chicago, June 6th, 7th, 8th. It's going to be incredible. Hope to see you there. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.